Life Audio.
Welcome to the Crosswalk Devotional. We're glad to have you listening with us. Today's topic is about repairing fractured or difficult relationships to experience deeper connection. We'll return with a devotional after a brief message from our sponsors.
At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than money. It's a way to support the people, causes, and community you love, because helping you put your faith into action is at the heart of what we do. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
God's Heart for Relational Repair, written and read by Jennifer Slattery. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Matthew 5, verses 23 and 24. As someone navigating through some challenging and confusing relationships, this passage brings me comfort. While it doesn't guarantee reconciliation or a life filled with deep, safe, and fulfilling connections, even when I actively pursue such things, it does assure me that my relationships matter to God. In fact, they matter more to Him than my Sunday morning worship and my most generous and sacrificial tithe. This was a message He often conveyed to me back when I was a relatively new and extremely immature wife and Christ follower who'd spent years learning to hold grudges rather than choosing to forgive. Back then, it seemed like my husband and I were always fighting about something. Sadly, in our selfishness and pride, we often cared more about winning an argument than investing in the health of our marriage. If not for God's gentle but steady intervention, we probably would have divorced before our daughter's 5th birthday. Instead, the Lord nudged me to abandon my childish desire to prove myself right, getting my husband to admit to this, of course, with ample apology, and to choose gentle, gracious love instead. In short, to fight for our marriage rather than against it. This often occurred during church. I'd walk into the sanctuary frustrated, ruminating on some perceived injustice, expecting my husband to bridge the gap our anger had created between us. But then inevitably, once the music started and I began to sing God's praises, I'd sense Him softening my heart by allowing me to see my husband's. As I sat in the Lord's presence, He slowly replaced my bitterness and resentment with compassion and grace. In short, He brought a holy perspective to my otherwise selfish and deceived mind, while reminding me of times when I had behaved in a similar fashion. I find it challenging to remain upset with someone for hurting me in the same way I have them or someone else. Not only does this holy realization remind me of God's mercy toward me for a lifetime of thoughtless acts, but in that space, I'm also more apt to recall the reasons behind my past behaviors, which helps me view theirs with more curiosity and understanding and less contempt. The Lord's love for me and my husband and our relationship elevates my view, helping me to respond to conflict less like a wounded toddler prone to lashing out and more like the mature Spirit-led adult I am, by God's grace, becoming. While this might feel like losing in the moment, it positions me to win in the ways that matter most. Living this way also helps me avoid the sting of regret that comes when we feed and unleash rather than prayerfully process our anger and make the situation worse. Potentially irreparably so. This seems to be Christ's warning in His words that follow. Quote, "Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court," He said in verse 25. Otherwise, we might find ourselves hit with a heavy ruling, a verdict we didn't anticipate, like relationships shattered over matters we could have by God's grace resolved. This is where I find His instructions in verses 21 and 22, where He equated hateful thoughts with murder, helpful. In this, He let us know that one doesn't typically jump from offense to homicide. Most often, murder comes after someone's hurt turns to a settled anger, where they've rehashed the emotional blow, attaching other violations to it until they've amassed a long list of wrongs that vilify the offender while typically minimizing the ways they've caused the other person pain. Intersecting life and faith. We experience the most peace in our souls and relationships when we learn to deal with our emotions before we begin to devalue the other person. That was the message Jesus conveyed when he warned us against calling others worthless, raka in the original Greek, or a fool. May we, God's beloved, redeemed, and empowered children, never allow our anger to become so strong and unmitigated that we become unable to see the other person's value as a human being created in the image of God. I don't mean to suggest this is easy. In fact, there are times when doing so will feel excruciatingly hard, if not impossible. But that's when Jesus' words at the beginning of the chapter can prove so helpful. When we remember that he sees our pain, every injustice we experience, and promises to reward our every obedient act, we feel less compelled to vindicate ourselves. We're better able to trust him to work all things for our good and his glory. And often, he does his most beautiful work in those very relationships we otherwise might have destroyed. Because our God is for us, for our joy, peace, and relational fulfillment.
The Crosswalk Devotional is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.
Feeling stressed? Let's take better care of you. I'm Bonnie Gray, the host of Breathe, the Stress Less podcast. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.